Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our Hanafi fiqh class from the kitab known as Us Sunan of Maulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi rahimahullah. Without further delay, we can begin. Bismillahi walhamdulillahi wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we are dealing with the chapter with regards to wudu, and we come into a new chapter tonight in the same broad heading of wudu, but under this chapter, which is Babu Istihbabi Tayammum. Babu Istihbabi Tayammum. The chapter regarding the fact that it is mustahab, and when you say mustahab, it's a standard linguistic term that is actually being used for sunnah. So mustahab we normally tend to understand as being you have sunnah, then you have mustahab, and that is correct. But in the context of here, anything which is mustahab from the word hub, which means beloved, desired. So therefore, anything which is sunnah is by its very nature something which is mustahab, something which is desirous, that we should urge ourselves towards. So don't think that because the word istihbab is used that automatically it means that it's mustahab. So the word used is istihbab, but it means sunnah. Tayamun means to start from the right side. So the chapter regarding the fact that it is sunnah to start from the right side. So let's begin. Our first hadith is hadith number 62. عن عائشة رضي الله عنها قالت كان النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يعجبه التيمن في تنعله وترجله وطهوره في شأنه كله رواه البخاري. Hadrat Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that it was the habit, it was something that the Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam greatly loved, is this issue of tayammun. Tayammun is to start from the right in everything. He says, or at least Hadrat Aisha radiallahu anha says, fi tana'ulihi, in his putting on of his shoes. Wa tarajjulihi. Tarajjul here don't mean from the rajulun, from the word man, but from the word rajulun, which means hair. So wa tarajjulihi, in the combing of the hair of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. I mean, you could comb your hair anyway. Anybody who has hair combs it, but the issue is from where are you going to start combing it? So it is from the sunnah that you comb your hair. When you begin combing it, you start from the right side, you comb like that, and you end up on the left side of your head. So that is from the sunnah. Tuhurihi means that would apply here now in general to not only to wudu, but with everything. And in fact, the next part of the hadith clarifies things. Fi sha'nihi kullihi, in every single matter. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam always liked to start from the right. So that's why if you're washing your hands when beginning your wudu, right hand first, then left. If you're washing your arms, right arm first, then left. If you're washing your feet, right foot first, then left. That's how it goes. Always the right one comes before the left. And this hadith is reported by Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. So we don't even have to talk about authenticity in this regard. Moving on to hadith number 63. عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إذا توضأتم فابدأوا بميامنكم أخرجه الأربعة وصححه ابن خزيمة بلوغ المرام. Hadrat Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that when you make your wudu, then start from your right. In other words, in everything all your actions of wudu always start from the right. This is reported by Al-Arba'a. Is this a new book of hadith known as Al-Arba'a? No. The four meanings, the four Sunan, and it's graded as being authentic by Imam Ibn Khuzaymah rahimahullah, and this is mentioned by Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah in his kitab known as Bulughul Maram. So that was a second hadith to show the fact that we should always start from the right. And that's basically all he needed to prove. So it's sufficient and we move on. Now we move on to the next chapter. One hadith, short chapter, but in any case, which is Babu Admi Wujubil Wala. The chapter regarding the fact that wala is not wajib in wudu. Now what is wala? Wala don't mean a wali or making friends with someone in wudu. It don't refer to that. Wala in the context of wudu refers to doing things immediately after the other. and you'll understand it better from the hadith. So it's عن نافع أن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله عنه بال في السوق ثم توضأ وغسل وجهه ويديه ومسح برأسه ثم دعي لجنازة ليصلى عليها حين دخل المسجد فمسح على خفيه ثم صلى عليها. رواه مالك في الموطأ وإسناده صحيح جليل. The famous freed slave of Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, Nafi', he narrates that Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, on one day he had relieved himself when he was out in the marketplace. Not obviously in the open, in the street. It means he was out and he had a need to relieve himself, so he relieved himself. And then, ثم توضأ, so he made wudu. وغسل وجهه ويديه, so he washed his face and his hands, meaning his, obviously when we say hands, we mean arms up until the elbows. ومسح برأسه, he made masah of his head. ثم دعي لجنازة, then somebody came suddenly and he called Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar. Now this was after the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you can tell from the fact that Nafi' is the narrator of this incident. So he was present over there. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had already long time passed away by this time. So this was after the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which establishes it as fact, that it's not something that he could have done and then he was corrected. So he was from the fuqaha of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum. So that alone gives it basis before anything else. But in any case, so Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he was making his wudu. He had just completed wiping his head. He had not yet reached his feet when somebody came to call him for a janaza, to perform the janaza salah. So he حين دخل المسجد, when he entered the masjid. So فمسح على خفيه ثم صلى عليها. So what it's basically telling you is that there was a period of time from the time when Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar washed his face, his arms, wiped his head, then he didn't wash his feet. He had to do, he was wearing khuffayn, as you see, فمسح على خفيه, he wiped over his feet. So in other words, we talk about the point from it being, it's from the sunnah, so you don't abandon it unnecessarily, but sometimes things were done for the sake of ta'aleem, to teach a person, and that's how these freed slaves and them ended up getting this knowledge, for them to transmit it to us, because the Sahaba radiallahu anhum also did things for them to learn thereby. And Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma would not have done this if there was no substantiation for it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any case, so when he came to the masjid, he was called to make the janazah salah. So he wiped over his khuffayn and then he went forward and performed the janazah salah. So which tells a person that because there was a space of time which had passed by from the time when he wiped his head to the time when he made masah of his khuffayn, the rest of his limbs had naturally dried. Now, you may have, if you've gone to maktab and stuff like this here, you would have come across the fact that how people tend to explain it is that you should not delay in your wudu to the point that one limb dries before washing the next limb. And that's what we stick with, that it is sunnah that you do not delay unnecessarily. So a person should never delay if you don't have a valid excuse for it. But it's just showing that it is not wajib. In other words, if there was a delay, your wudu is still valid. Imam Malik rahimahullah reports this hadith in his Muwatta, and he says that it's mentioned here, وَإِسْنَادُهُ صَحِيحٌ جَلِيلٌ, that the chain of narration is authentic, and it's a great authentic chain. You can't fault this narration. Okay, so there was basically just this one narration in the whole chapter, and like I say, we stick with what is sunnah, but we keep in mind still the fact that there are certain things that do not invalidate a person's wudu. Now, how we have amongst the proofs which is mentioned in this regard here, which is is, for example, we touched upon this just the other day, which is that if you are making wudu, or you've made your wudu finish already, you've dried yourself off, and now while you're drying yourself, you look, hey, why is my elbow dry? Because obviously you can see the rest of your body is wet, but my elbow, the water didn't touch it. Now what do? You've already gone out wherever you were making wudu, you go into the room and things, and now you see the difference where the water had reached to the part where the water had not reached. So obviously, because the water hadn't touched that point, therefore that limb was not washed. Ergo, you don't have wudu in reality. So therefore, and we've done this before, do you need to make your wudu all over again? We say no. All you have to do is wash the limb which was missed. We did this in the chapter of ghusl as well, that if you missed a portion, all you do is wash it later. So this proves that the fact that you can wash it later proves that wala is not wajib, because had it been wajib, you wouldn't have been able to do this. You would have had to go and reperform your entire wudu because a substantial period of time had passed by. So in any case, that is that particular chapter. Now we move on to the next chapter, which is Babu Istihbabi Mashi Raqabati, the chapter with regards to the fact that it is mustahab, but when we say mustahab, we mean sunnah, that it is sunnah to make masah of the nape, the back of your neck. Now, this is something, and I remember this from 15 years ago or more, when you come from a particular background, you were taught these type of things, the method of wudu from a childhood days, and you know about wiping your neck and everything like this. And then I came across Salafis and saw that Salafis claiming that there's no basis for wiping the neck, it's a bid'ah, innovation and all that sort of stuff. And and the way that the world works, and that's one of the reasons why I chose to do this kitab, is because generally the dalil, the proofs of the madhahib is not out there. So when a Salafi comes along and he makes an attack and he says that there's no basis for this thing, and you ask the normal man in the street, he doesn't know the proof for himself. So at the end of the day, he's left with, well, I don't know proof. He's saying there's no proof, so maybe he's right. And then they end up following Salafis in this regard. Not only this, but many other points. So when you do a kitab like this here, you come across the ahadith and things, and you come to realize that the proofs are there. Salafis just either don't know it, or they have their own misguidance that leads them away from it. But whatever the case may be, this is the chapter with regards to making masah of the neck. So we move on and we start hadith number 65. عن فليح بن سليمان عن نافع عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من توضأ ومسح بيديه على عنقه وقي الغل يوم القيامة. Fulayh ibn Sulaiman narrates from Nafi', the same Nafi' of before, from Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, who said that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Man tawadda'a, he who makes wudu, wa masaha biyadayhi, and he wipes with both his hands, ala unuqihi, on his neck, wuqiya al-ghullu yawm al-qiyamah, he will be protected from being shackled on the day of Qiyamah. رواه أبو الحسن بن فارس بإسناده وقال هذا إن شاء الله حديث صحيح. Imam Abu al-Hasan ibn Faris, he reported this hadith with his chain of narration, and he said that inshallah this is an authentic hadith. Now Imam Ibn Hajar mentions in At-Talkhis al-Habir, Imam Ibn Hajar, he says that there's actually somebody missing in the chain, but at the end of the day, our Hanafi Mustalah al-Hadith goes like this, is that when one muhaddith has accepted a hadith, then another one weakening it does not change that fact that it is fine to act upon. That's the one point. The second thing is what we know as talaqqi bil qabul, something which has been accepted by the fuqaha, then that itself becomes a proof as well. And the fact that wudu has been taught all the years in this manner, wiping the neck, that comes down from generation to generation like that, from Sahaba radiallahu anhum, tabi'in, right down the chain. So, that alone adds strength to this narration. Sometimes people look, what's the supporting evidence to raise the level of authenticity? Talaqqi bil qabul is one such thing which raises the level to the level of authenticity from the point that the fuqaha have accepted the narration and this practice, therefore it is suitable to practice upon. And I often tend to bring up this example, Imam At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah, he quotes in his Sunan At-Tirmidhi. Now, it was his habit to always quote a hadith and then give his grading with regards to it. So Imam At-Tirmidhi, in his Sunan, he reports a hadith, and another thing that he would do is report the authenticity, his grading of the narration, and then he would say, this is the Hanafis or the Shafi'is, and then they act on this or they differ with this and stuff like this here. So we would give from a fiqh perspective as well. So there's a narration which Imam At-Tirmidhi rahimahullah reports, and after quoting this narration and grading it as the chain as being weak, thereafter he states that upon this is the amal of the fuqaha. So despite the fact that the narration itself is weak, but on account of the qabul of the qubuliyat of the ulama, that the ulama and fuqaha have accepted it, that has raised it on its own to the level of authenticity. But in any case, so this is merely one narration. There are others which support it, and those supporting evidences too raises it to a level of reliability and authenticity. So that was the first hadith. We move on to hadith number 66. عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من توضأ ومسح على عنقه وقي الغل يوم القيامة. Also same from Hadrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, whoever makes wudu and he makes masah, he wipes his neck, he will be saved from being shackled on the day of Qiyamah. Now, one thing I want to just touch on in the hadith number 65 that we did above, which is وَمَسَحَ بِيَدَيْهِ. I didn't exactly touch on how do you wipe your neck. For those who know, you know. For those who don't know, when a person is making your wudu, you have made your masah. So if you're looking as to when does the masah of the nape fit in the order of wudu, it comes, you've washed your face, you've come to the point, you've wiped your head from front to back, back to front, you've put your index fingers in your ears, you've taken your thumbs and you've cleaned over the back and or the back of your ears. You've done essentially masah of your ears now. And after this, now you take the back of your both hands, both fingers. You meet the if you think of it, if you are listening to this right now, take your hands, put your hands behind your neck. You know, the words used in the hadith of being shackled, think of it as being shackled with your hands to the back of your neck, behind your head, so to speak. But here you're talking about the back of your fingers are meeting, the tips of your fingers are meeting one another with the back part of your fingers touching the back of your neck, which is your nape. And then in this manner, you will just wipe it from meeting from the center, and you wipe from, as you say, wipe outwards on your neck. So from the inside out, that's how you would do one fluid motion with both hands, and that's how your masah of the nape is done in wudu. So in any case, that was just so you understand where the wiping of the neck fits in the wudu. Okay, so this second hadith, it says basically the same thing, that you'll be saved from being shackled on the day of Qiyamah. رواه أبو منصور الديلمي في مسند الفردوس بسند ضعيف. شرح إحياء العلوم للعلامة الزبيدي. This narration is reported by Imam Abu Mansur al-Daylami. This is Imam al-Daylami rahimahullah. His Musnad al-Firdaus is his name of his kitab, his book of hadith, and he reports it with a weak chain. This is Maulana Zafar Ahmad mentioning this point here. And who's it graded weak by? By Imam Murtada al-Zabiri. Imam Murtada al-Zabiri was one of the Hanafi ulama, faqih, muhaddith, and he had written a sharh. This is his most famous kitab that he is known for, his sharh of the Ihya ul-Ulum al-Din of Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah. So you know that Imam Murtada al-Zabiri. I think in the Ramadan series, not from last year, but the year before that, which was the ulama series, I think I touched on briefly on the biography of Imam Murtada al-Zabiri rahimahullah. So for those who have not heard about him before, you are welcome to listen to that recording to get an idea as to who Imam Murtada al-Zabiri rahimahullah was. All right, so that was hadith number 66. We've got one last hadith. This is the whole all of this is the explanations and the arguments and counter arguments with regards to the topic, but we're going to focus just on the hadith. So we move on to hadith number 67, which is عن ليث عن طلحة بن مصرف عن أبيه عن جده رضي الله عنه أنه رأى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يمسح رأسه حتى بلغ القذال وما يليه من مقدم العنق. رواه أحمد النيل. وقد مر توثيق ليث وتحسين حديث طلحة عن أبيه عن جده. I'm going to read it in pieces. So the first part is that this is narrated through Layth from Talha ibn Musarrif, who reports from his father, who reports from his father, meaning from the grandfather of Talha ibn Musarrif. This grandfather was a Sahabi. He said that he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiping his head. Hatta balagha al-qadhal. What is qadhal? Qadhal means the back of the neck, the nape. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped his head right until he reached the back of his nape. وَمَا يَلِيهِ, and what carries on after. In other words, the head was wiped completely, but it didn't stop at the base of the hair, where the hair ends, but rather it went further, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped his neck as well. وَمَا يَلِيهِ مِن مُقَدَّمِ الْعُنُقِ, from the beginning portion of the neck. In other words, if you were to see a person, your own body and your own neck, if you were to look at the back of your neck in your mind, then it is, you know, where your hair ends, or depending on how long your hair is, but anyway, you know where your neck begins. What we understand to be your neck, that is what is wiped. So, you know, when you put your fingers behind your neck and you wipe like that, you are basically covering your neck. So don't think, okay, well, I got a long neck here now, so I got to wipe my hands and wipe 2-3 times. No, one wipe, that is sufficient. That is the first point. And that the obviously where your now below your shoulders, this point is not regarded as neck anymore. So when we're talking about in the context of what Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam wiped, it was to wipe the head right up until the back and this nape as well, simplifying the issue. Now he says that this is reported by Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, is mentioned in Nail, which is Nail al-Awtar. He says, previously we've already passed by this before, the fact that Layth is thiqa, is authentic, reliable. You can take what he says. And وَتَحْسِينُ حَدِيثِ طَلْحَةَ, and the narrations which Talha ibn Musarrif reports from his father, from his grandfather, these narrations are graded in Hasan. It's authentic and reliable. He says, that's from the first point. ورواه الطحاوي في معاني الآثار بلفظ مسح مقدم رأسه حتى بلغ القذال من مقدم عنقه. He says, the Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah, who was a great Hanafi faqih and muhaddith from the Salaf, it is the Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah. He reports in Sharh Ma'ani al-Athar, the same narration with the additional wording, or at least I should say his wording makes mention that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped muqaddami ra'si, the front part of his head, until he reached the back of his head, min muqaddami unuqihi, from the muqaddam here don't mean from the front of the neck. In other words, don't let the words bring up a picture in your mind that you're wiping over your throat. That is not from the wudhu at all. Muqaddami unuqihi here means from the beginning of the neck, the beginning of the nape, that back part of your neck. That is what is being referred to. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped this part. He says, رجاله إلى ليث كلهم ثقات, that the chain of narration from Imam al-Tahawi to Layth is all authentic, reliable people. And we've already established that Layth is thiqa, and we established that Talha ibn Musarrif, his chain of narration is authentic. So in other words, the narration which Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah reports is without fault. He says, ورواه الطبراني بلفظ فلما مسح رأسه قال هكذا. And Imam al-Tabarani rahimahullah, he reports the hadith with this wording, فلما مسح رأسه, when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped his head, قال هكذا. قال here don't mean he said. قال in this context means Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam did this. قال هكذا. And he said, وَأَوْمَأَ بِيَدِهِ مِن مُقَدَّمِ رَأْسِهِ. This is now the narrator, which would be the grandfather of Talha ibn Musarrif. The narrator was physically showing that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam wiped his head until قال هكذا, he did this. وأومأ بيده, and he indicated with his hand من مقدم رأسه, he indicated that from the beginning of the head حتى بلغ بهما إلى أسفل عنقه, until he بلغ بهما, he reached with both hands إلى أسفل عنقه, to the bottom, إلى أسفل, the lowest part of the neck, من قبل قفاه, you know, right at the base of your neck. That's how far Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam wiped in his masah of his head. So the wiping of the nape was done by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this narration over here. He says كذا في غاية المقصود. This is how it's mentioned in the kitab known as غاية المقصود. وقد مر تحقيق رجاله في باب إفراد المضمضة عن الاستنشاق. He says previously we've already passed by the تحقيق, the, you know, when we're talking about the investigation and the authenticating of the narrations, the narrators in the narrators found in this chain of narration. We've already passed it by in the chapter when we dealt with the fact, the hadith and the chapter which dealt with using separate water for rinsing the nose and for the mouth and nose, separate water for each, not taking one hand and putting a little bit in the mouth and a little in the nose. So in that chapter, we dealt with this chain of narration and we found it to be authentic and reliable. So therefore, in this situation here, the narration which Imam al-Tabarani is reporting is also authentic and reliable, because if the chain of narration was authentic then it's authentic now. That's basically what it is boiling down to. So, you know, we'll end on this point here, inshallah, because next one, yeah, we could have done that, but there's a bit more the explanation on that point. But any case, so you can look just from this narration, even if you put the previous narration, if you did away with this first narration, hadith number 65, where Imam Abu Hassan ibn Faris graded it as authentic, and another muhaddith kafa. So you say, okay, you're not 100% convinced. Fine, you can establish that it exists, that certain muhaddithin have graded it authentic, but maybe you want to look at the chain of narration a little bit more. Okay, first narration. We look at the second narration. Okay, it's mentioned here, he reported with a weak chain of narration, so we say, okay, fine. So we've got one with a chain which has been graded authentic by some and having a bit of weakness to others. The second one, we've established here now that he's got a weak chain. Fine. And third narration here, we establish that the chain of narration which is reported from Imam Ahmad rahimahullah is authentic. The chain of narration reported by Imam al-Tahawi rahimahullah is authentic. And the chain of narration reported by Imam al-Tabarani rahimahullah is authentic. So in essence, this hadith number 67 is in reality 3 hadith in and of its own self, all 3 of which is authentic. So when a person wants to say there's no basis for wiping the neck in wudu, here we have 3 hadith, all of which is authentic, and I'm not talking about number 64 and 65, just 65 and 66. Just hadith number 67 on its own is 3 hadith in one, all 3 of which is authentic. And if this if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was doing this, and the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum thus did this, and so it went on down the line, why on earth would we throw the sunnah and the practice of the ummah out the window for the sake of a Salafi who was born yesterday that don't have a sanad in hadith? You know, one of the things of ijaza and the isnad, as Imam Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak rahimahullah used to say, al-isnad min ad-din, walawla al-isnad laqala man sha'a ma sha'a, that this isnad, this chain of narration is from the deen, and had it not been for this chain of narration, anybody could have said whatever he wanted to. So when we, from a madhab perspective, we bring something, is because we have an unbroken chain, teacher, student to teacher, up and up and up, right up to the time of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. That's what a sanad is. We don't only have sanad in Bukhari and Muslim and the books of hadith, we've got sanad in fiqh and sanad from teacher, student to teacher, right up to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, through a Sahabi. Now, if you noticed over here, in the previous chapter which we were doing, there were two to three ahadith which were quoted, all of which came from Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma. So there are many masail which comes through Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, which is accepted now, for example, by the Ahnaf. So the at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that when we trace our chain through Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah to his teachers, it ends up going Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu anhu, yeah, on this case, Hazrat Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu on this issue, and things like this. And that's how we end up having these opinions. Not because we was sitting there one day and decided we just want to make our own things up. So sometimes the thing is not written in a book in so many words that the Salafi couldn't come across it, but our talaqi bil qabul, our tawaruth, this is the other thing which is known as tawaruth, as you may imagine from the word wirath, mirath, waratha, all same thing, which is that it is an inherited opinion which has come from the time of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum down. So at the end of the day, there are sufficient proofs for everything that the madhahib do. And if a Salafi differs, the problem lies with him and not what has been established in the deen by the fuqaha and the muhaddithin for over 1,400 years. But in any case, that being that, we will end on this point here, inshallah ta'ala. And in our class next week, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, we will continue on from this next chapter, which is hadith number 68 and page 125. But that being that, like I always say, if anybody has any questions, you're always welcome to ask the questions. You don't have to wait until the last moment. But if you have not got any questions, everything's clear and straightforward, then we'll end on that point there, inshallah. I'll just give a minute or so just in case anybody is typing us a question. But other than that, we'll end. But at the end of the day, what is the purpose of us doing this kitab? It's not to, it's not like, oh, you just here attacking people. No, the point of the matter is to prove that irrespective of empty drums making the most noise, at the end of the day, we have generations of fuqaha and muhaddithin and everything behind us for 1,000 and something years, where our beliefs and opinions and things come from. It's not just something I woke up today and I decided I want to do this, or I feel this way is good. No. And the thing is, this was the efforts, this kitab Us Sunan, the efforts of a person now in the recent age, Maulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi rahimahullah. You can check his biography, you'll see he lived now the other day. So when he wrote this kitab, he was pulling from the narrations that we know from Musnad al-Firdaus and this. But Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah lived before these kitabs were written. So if Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah taught these narrations to his students and stuff like this here, that means that it existed. So for example, Imam Bukhari grades it as being weak. Imam Bukhari is grading his chain of narration with maybe 5 extra people in the chain. He's grading that as being weak. Not the chain of narration of Imam Abu Hanifa, which had like a fraction of the amount of narrators that he had. So when people don't have the understanding of how the science of hadith fits in with the rules of fiqh and stuff, then they make their own statements and stuff like this here. But at the end of the day, the fuqaha and the muhaddithin work together, and many of them were muhaddithin and many of the muhaddithin were fuqaha. So they derived all of these laws and stuff like this here, not for a person who would come today and have no understanding of anything to make his own thing and decide, I know better than what you know. So that being that, I don't see any questions having come in, so we will end on this point here, inshallah ta'ala. Until next time, wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad, subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.